In the first two parts with Jonas, we moved between wounds and strength, between ideals and reality, and between the feminine and the masculine within us all. In this third and final part, we go even deeper. We talk about polarization, why it happens, how we can begin to heal it, and what really changes when we start to meet each other for real. This isn't just about ideas, but about practice, about presence, and about the courage to stay human, together. Welcome back to 34, the Intimacy Podcast. What does a wounded masculine or a wounded feminine look like in practice? Meaning, how would they show up in a relationship?
Yeah, I think it can be so different because, when we talk about masculine and feminine, it's like an umbrella term. So the masculine can contain a lot of things. And one is directness, which I have, with the honesty.
Yeah.
So when I'm maybe a wounded masculine and I am rigid maybe in the honesty and the directness, then I become too straight and hurt people. But it can show up in so many ways depending on which masculine or feminine trait you choose, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably see examples of men maybe going into trying to please and fix very much, right? Like perform something. That it's all about performance and delivering something.
Yeah.
Which in one way is masculinity, but when it becomes sort of the only key driver and you're not actually listening and taking in and holding space, for example, you actually become too much fix-it mode, so to speak, right?
Yeah. Yeah, maybe this becomes, I am just thinking now about what we mean when we talk about the wounded masculine, because I think it could mean someone that holds tight in the masculine traits because they are afraid and rely on them. It could also be someone who has been wounded when they show the masculine traits and seen that doesn't work. So maybe it's a question what we're talking about here, what it means.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about what I mentioned here with the one father who was teaching through pressure, like be strong, don't cry, win at all cost. That child will have fear of failing or showing weakness or not being enough, right? Or if you then take it with the other one that is much more compete with joy, for example.
Yeah.
But do that without shame and learn from it, right?
Yeah.
More about it.
Yeah, and maybe then with the example of my friend, we could talk about like a wounded feminine because her feminine part of sensitivity wasn't welcomed and didn't work, and she was like pressured out of it. So I'm just imagining, when it shows up in a relationship, she will have a hard time to actually be sensitive and trust the other one and ask for support. And
I think a lot of women are being taught from very early on to stay quiet and be pretty and not take space, and we can already see that early on, even in the daycare with kids, right? That the way they are being taught into a masculine or a feminine role, depending on right?
Yeah.
Oh, you're a boy, you should like blue. You're a girl, you should like pink, as an example, right?
Yeah.
Sort of, it starts to box them into a certain mold already there, in one way.
Yeah. And then it's more like a boxed-in masculine or a boxed-in feminine. And
exactly. And it starts really early on, right?
Yeah. Because I can definitely see like how we can talk about wounded masculine for someone, having a lot of drive and a lot of force, and that hasn't worked. It hasn't been welcomed. And then it's like that force gets crippled and, the man loses its power.
Yeah.
And then maybe it becomes very like people pleasing and unreliable and not standing stable. So that's one way I could talk about, wounded masculinity, where masculinity hasn't worked when you were young.
Yeah.
And then I see the total opposite, where someone is wounded and because of that they become rigid in their masculinity.
Yeah.
So like, I think I said this to you about how when I was working with cases with domestic violence.
Yeah, I remember.
the pattern there is that the man becomes very jealous and then, act on that fear and creates a prison for the woman. So maybe he has traits of masculinity that is maybe to be strong or dominant or, or very holding or structured. But when you add fear to that, it becomes abusive and it becomes controlling. So then it's like he still has the masculine traits, but when you add the fear, it comes into the downsides of it.
Yeah. And this is, again, I think where you can learn that from a very young age, going back to the wounded child more or less coming in there, right? That if you learn that you need to be strong and need to hold it together, and it becomes attached to fear, right? The fear of showing weakness, the fear of losing, the fear of, and that can in that case be a danger, I think, in a relationship in that sense.
Definitely.
Because if you're looking for validation, and I think jealousy is a great example where I think a lot of jealousy comes from insecurity in yourself, that you are afraid of not being loved, that you're not enough.
Yeah.
Not enough. I think that's where it becomes scary, where love becomes scary.
Yeah. And it can look very unafraid. Like if we look at the man that is very controlling or very dominant, it looks as confidence, but it's actually not. Because actual confidence is when you also can, be afraid and be open with that,
Yeah.
and take support in your fearfulness, or like to also be sensitive or be vulnerable.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you have someone who like can, not leave his masculine traits of maybe dominance or power or structure, but also, be caring and be empathic and be listening, then that becomes, super duper safe for a woman. Then it becomes like a containment and a holding and being able to direct in a way that is also, open.
Yeah, and you can open up both ways much easier that way, right? Because the man would open up and the woman would also open up.
Yeah, it becomes more out of service.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's a nice way to put it and a nice way to look at it. So how would you say that awareness and vulnerability help heal those wounds without losing polarity?
Yes, if you want to heal without losing polarity, I think you need to also, stay and appreciate and also nurture the part that you might have get stuck in. So if you want to grow out of being controlling, I think it's not to just dismiss the controlling part of me, but also seeing like, so what is the more mature expression, which can come when I have also been vulnerable, when I can be open with my fears, when I don't have to. I guess the difference is that I don't have to use my masculinity to deal with my fear, but I can let my fear be open. I can be in a relationship with the fear and be open with it.
That makes
At the same time as I also keep my masculine traits. So some people fall into the trap of being only the other. So then I'm going to only be vulnerable and open and ask for support, and maybe you lose your solidness in that.
Yeah, it's a good way to look at it. And for me, I think a lot of when you dare to be, well, I think the first step to even self-love, I think, is sort of awareness in one way, right? That you are aware about yourself, and that you get triggered by certain things, and you are that, hey, you are worthy of love. And when you get to that point, I think that's the first step to even starting to love yourself, right? That it's all about awareness around that. And then showing vulnerability in a relationship, I think, is really where it shows, where you can show growth, the personal growth you might have had, and how you grow through that.
Yeah.
And polarity, I guess, in this is, I mean, we talked about how we're all carrying masculine and feminine within, right? And for me, I think masculine is sort of much more about holding and direction and the strength, and the feminine is much more about creativity and softness and enjoyment, right? And giving in to pleasure, and as a true life force, if you ask me. And I think getting this balance and polarity, I think we both need the polarity, but how do you really embrace both sides? I think that's really hard.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's often scary for us to step out into the one that is not so known to us.
Exactly.
So like for me, some masculine traits are comfortable to step into, like structure and like directness, but some are more edgy for me, like to being powerful and to really lead. And some feminine traits are easier for me to step into, and some are really challenging. So yeah, it has to be vulnerable, whichever way you go, right?
Exactly. But I think, I mean, I think we both know that when we do that, I think you can live life more fully in one
Yeah.
way. And I
Well,
think,
I'm curious on you, Henrik. Like when we talk about this, what has been like maybe an example from both, like what has been a masculine trait that has felt vulnerable for you to step into, and also like a feminine trait that has felt vulnerable for you to step into.
I mean, I think the hardest part that I've learned a lot now by working with myself and doing these things, and also thinking back on my long-term relationship I was in, where I really was a fixer. I was just walking into the mode of I wanted to fix things, and as soon as my ex-wife was trying to open up and talk around what she felt or she needed or something like that, I was trying to fix it. I was almost interrupting her coming up with a solution and a fix for whatever it was, right? Whereas I think what she really needed was for me just to hold her and stay there. And,
Mm. And
and
what do you think your fear was like? What was vulnerable about doing that, or did you fear about doing that?
like with most men, I think it is about that we're taught to deliver something. We're taught to perform. We're taught we're here to fix things. We're here to deliver. We're here to do things. We need to be strong, and we need to show the direction in almost into stupidity, right? That
Mm.
we want to go and deliver something. Whereas the woman might appreciate that we can take and show direction and make decisions and say we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Doesn't always mean that we have to go and fix the problem itself, right? Whereas they might just need somebody to hold space for them and listen to them and be there
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
stay, not just. I think a lot of, I mean, not me,
And I
but I think a lot
and
of.
I imagine like when you have tried that, that it felt like, whoa, I'm not doing anything right now. Like I'm like, what am I worth to this woman? Because I'm not doing anything, I'm not fixing anything. And I imagine it's been like your brain has been screaming when you have been only holding.
Yes, exactly, and I think that was I think in a lot of cases, I think a lot of couples I talk to, and even a lot of individuals, they are, you meet somebody, let's say you're between 20 or 25, and you find somebody and you end up living with this person for a long period of time. And if you're not emotionally aware about yourself, like having that self-awareness and willingness to actually evolve and grow, do personal growth with yourself, you can sort of get stuck in the age you're in when you start that relationship, because that's sort of that is the emotional level of maturity you have on both sides, right? And there might be things there when you start then developing in the relationship, you might be growing into it. And that's when you start drifting apart. You don't have the same interest. You don't have the same way of communicating, or you're communicating as when you're 25, and you're 35 or 40 or 45. And it's really hard then to show, to stay in or find the right balance between how do we actually communicate, right, in the right way? Because at the same time, you might be growing your career, you might be doing other things in life that is progressing you. But if you don't embody that within the relationship, it's going to be very, very hard to find your way back.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm not saying that is impossible. And I think a lot of people are talking about this fact that you might have multiple different relationships in life when you go through life. And in the best case, that can be with the same person, right? Because you go through a phase and you say, okay, now I'm in a new phase, and then you choose to go into that new phase with an awareness around it, right? And you choose to grow together in it as an individual and as a couple. I think that's when you can create beauty within a relationship. And
and I also think it's very possible, but I also think it has to be scary. Like you can't change that without it being vulnerable and without it being scary. And sometimes when we talk about vulnerability, it can sound so nice and almost cozy, but I think like when you really get to vulnerability, it's like you're scared. You're super scared.
it is.
Like that's why I wanted to ask you about like when you were just holding someone and you're like you've built your self-worth as a man to do things in the world and fix things, and then it's not within. It's not so cute. It's really scary.
Yeah, and I think now when I am with a woman and we open up on that level, and it is about holding space. It's much more about allowing, for example, her just to cry
Mm.
or just talk, and then just be there. Hold her, say maybe just a few comforting words, and not trying to fix her problem, because it's not about maybe fixing the problem. It's more about allowing her to be in her feminine, because a lot of women today are in their masculine so much, and they are almost afraid not to be in their feminine and show weakness in that sense, right?
Yeah.
And it's
And
not
I
about
imagine then what I talked about before, that
yeah.
it's when we can add the opposite, that the quality of us coming to fruition, it's in its most beautiful way. So I think you have a beautiful quality of doing things and fixing things, and when you can also be holding and also embrace, and you're not scared. You don't have to fix someone from a scared place.
Exactly.
Then I think also you're doing and you're providing solutions can also be much more powerful and can be received, of course, in a whole different way.
And I think that's when you can start living life to the full, right? When you are whole as a person, is when you can look at both those sides and not be afraid of them, but embrace it. And how do I embrace that in the best way?
Yeah. Yeah, because I think when you have only the fixing part of you,
Yeah.
then I think the woman can sense that, oh, I'm not, it can feel like, oh, I'm not allowed to be sad, or I'm not allowed to break down, because he fixes me when I am like that.
Yeah.
But when she can sense that you're also, welcoming, holding, not afraid of the tears, then I think the fixing, if it comes, comes from a whole different place and is received in a whole different way.
It is. And I think this is also where I think it's much more about, I don't strive for perfection in anything, because I don't think there is such a thing as perfection. And there's no such thing as 100% way on this, right? And I think you just have to be aware that you might make mistakes, and that's okay, right? It's more about actually owning a mistake and saying, "Hey, I am sorry," and saying, "I'm sorry" if you do a mistake.
Yeah.
And be aware of it. And I think you can come a long way just working with that, right?
Yeah.
So if you miss, for example, an opportunity then to hold a woman, and you say, "Okay, I notice now, I realize now this is what you needed from me, and I'm sorry, I missed this." That actually can still repair a bit of that sort of element within a relationship, right? That you realize and you can see that she needed something else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's, I think, a way of growing in its own right.
Yeah. And I think that part is so important, that you speak about forgiveness and being able to make mistakes. And when I talked about how I view development, that you both need to like make sure that you care for the needs of the scared part, but you also need to make a safe place for the other part that is underdeveloped to explore itself. Yeah. So like just now I'm just thinking about my friend again with, so if the shyness or the sensitivity was repressed growing up, then that shyness or sensitivity or asking for support needs safe places to do it, or safe ways to do it. And often that part can be like stuck, being maybe 3 years old or 5 years old. And then of course it's maybe be a bit messy when it comes out. So then I think it's so important to have that, to make sure that the relationship has the ability to forgive, or has the ability to tolerate that we make mistakes all the time. because that's the only way we can actually grow.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, you mentioned forgiveness here, and I think when we talk about healing the wounded masculine and the wounded feminine, I think, what do you think forgiveness then plays as a role in that process? I see that first of all, with yourself, we talked a lot about, self-awareness and self-love in one way, but also then to the other gender, if you will, right, in a relationship.
Yeah. I think the more you can have forgiveness in different places, the easier it becomes to grow out of things. So one thing also I think is to have forgiveness for your parents,
Yeah.
So like for me, my anger wasn't welcome. It didn't work for me to be angry, for example, at home. And then I, of course, can be angry with my parents with that, but I think a lot of things come from good intentions. So to be able to forgive them for not welcoming my anger is helping me to welcome it in myself. And it doesn't become like, I need to be angry, I need to grow that part, but it feels more, what should I say? It doesn't have so much charge, and then it becomes easier for me to step into that.
Well, that's a big realization for yourself when you get to that.
Yeah.
And forgiveness, I think, is sort of one of the most powerful things we can give to another person as well, or to yourself, for that matter, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I would love to hear something more about like where that question comes from in you, and like what do you think of when you ask the question?
No, I think forgiveness is something that I think a lot of people are forgetting, because if I look at how relationships have been falling out, or even how I've been fighting in the past, it has been coming from a place of, I need to win an argument. It is about winning the argument. And particularly women, I think, are actually really great in this. They go into an argument just for the sake of winning the argument. And men quite often just surrender to the fact, because they just want the woman to be happy. So they will always go into a neglect or self-neglect in that sense, or even self-loathing, where they don't want to argue anymore. And I think that's a good place where I think coming to a point of view where you realize that arguments happen in any relationship, but the way you go about it, and it's not about winning the argument, it is about understanding that it's us two against the issue, not us two against each other.
Yeah.
And when you get to that point, I think that's when forgiveness becomes a very powerful tool, where you can actually forgive, and you can forgive yourself as well. And that is such a multi-layered onion here. We can discuss all the different layers you need to forgive yourself, but when you start looking at in a relationship context, I think that's a very much more healthy way to look at where forgiveness comes into play, where you actually appreciate the way that it's not about what you as I don't need to win the argument with you, and I can see that you have your opinion, your point of view, and let's find a way of how we can address the issue together, rather than fighting us again together, right? If we can solve that in relationships, I think so many more relationships will be much more healthier and much more opening up to trust and communication within the relationship. And what I've seen now in a lot of the conversations I've had is that a lot of couples are going into, it's about them. It's not meaning the individual, not about them as a couple in that sense, right? And when it's all about winning an argument, it's not helping the relationship.
Yeah.
Because it then goes back.
I think I'm just noticing, like when you talk about this, I think, because I feel like I don't have a lot to say about forgiveness, and I was just wondering why. But when I hear you speak, I think it's because when you say like, maybe you have hold on more to your views, and I have been more like letting go of my views. So forgiveness for me has been like, I have always done that, but it has been more important for me to hold people accountable, to like demand things from people.
Yeah.
So that has been important for me. Like maybe instead of forgiving someone, it has been important for me to learn how to like actually, demand things or expect things from others. So again, like if we look at polarities, it depends on where you come from. So it sounds like for you, like forgiveness has been so crucial because you maybe had been able to stand your ground a lot. But for me, like the movement is the opposite.
No, I think, I mean, you actually have the other side of the coin, though, of forgiveness. And this is what you're alluding to now, I think, is you need to set boundaries for yourself.
Yeah.
And that means that you also need to set, and that's where you set the expectation on the other person, right? But I think that's where the balance is on one side, you need to come from the point of view that you need to forgive yourself and the other person for something. But you also need to, in a relationship, set a boundary for yourself as well as for the relationship, right? And have clear boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah, and I notice I feel so much more energy when we talk about setting boundaries because as I said, like forgiveness has been easier for me, and for me to have good relationships, it has been important to actually state my boundaries.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Like the thing you lack is where you feel the pull, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I think those two happen in every relationship. You need to be able to do both. And I mean, if forgiveness comes natural for you as a person, but I mean, if you think about the couples you're counseling, when you're counseling couples, what do you see in them then in that case? Because I think a lot of them must be in this argument phase or wondering if they're even together or how do they find their way back to each other, I guess, right?
Yeah. And there I feel like, I never want a premature forgiveness or like sometimes it can be premature because we have often learned from our parents to like say that you're sorry to this person now and you forgive this person. But I think for that to happen, you first have to be like seen in your hurt before you forgive someone. I think it's a movement that happens naturally when someone sees you in your hurt. Yeah. So the emphasis I put when I work with conflicts and with couples is for the other one, the one who has hurt someone, to really see and take their perspective and to say back to them, so I see that you really hurt now when I stepped over your boundaries and I did a careless thing. So I see that from that you lost trust in me and you feel disappointed and you also look really sad right now. And so when someone feels seen in their hurt, I would say that is where reparation comes from, and then it becomes easy to forgive.
And I think that's actually comes with the person that needs to see the other person being hurt. I think that's awareness is, I think, a key thing for the other person to forgive. The other person needs to be aware of what has been caused, right?
Yeah, and it's like that. It's like that need to be seen. I more and more I just see how fundamental that is.
Yeah.
When we talk about like attachment issues and things, it's often from that you want to be seen as a child, and also as adults when we're hurt, we want to be seen in the hurt.
Yeah.
And I had it was for me puzzling conflict I had with a friend a few years ago where he had done something that really disappointed me, and we talked about that, and I was angry with him. And after a while, he said that, well, I don't know if I should stand up for myself here or if I should, put myself flat towards you. And I surprised myself by saying, like, I don't care what you're doing. I want you to say what you heard me experience or what you heard me say back to me how it was for me. And then I was like, oh, okay, I can do that. And then he said, okay, Jonas, I see that you was expecting this and became really disappointed, and now you lost trust in me. And then I was like, yeah, exactly. And then it was over. Yeah. So I didn't need him to like do anything special. Like, you can stand up for yourself, you can lay yourself flat, but what I need is to just be seen in my hurt. And that's what was needed.
And I think the important thing here with forgiveness in this context is not just in romantic relationships, it's in every connection we have with other people. I think this is a crucial part.
Yeah, where we have conflicts, like which we have in our relationships. Yeah. And then it was like I auto apologized him because yeah.
Which is nice.
Yeah.
But if we then think about romantic relationships in this way, right? I mean, we I think we always touched on this, and you even used the word here, container for healing, more or less, right? So when it becomes like a container for healing, do you think the thing where I would get to here is sort of individually, we all need to have done some work first, I guess, to even be aware of our, I mean, how we are in a relationship, right? I think this is where I want to get to with these conversations is really for people to start becoming more aware of themselves. So when they go into a relationship, they can be more aware, because that's when you can start healing even more and see the progress you're making as an individual.
Yeah.
Within a relationship, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The first thing is always to be aware and to see things. And I think it's so important to have that ability to see things without becoming reactive. Like you talked about the fixing part of you. And if you don't have awareness in a way that's just seeing or just welcoming or just able to be with something, I don't think that works well. So the first important step is to just see things.
Yeah.
And I think you can do that in a relationship. You can have an aware relationship in that sense, that you bring things up to the surface, what is happening and what is going on. And also, I think firstly, step one is without the need to fix it or to be better or now I need to solve this, but allowing us to also be broken humans and to be, attachment wounded humans and to be the wounded masculine and feminine. And like, I think that is really the first step.
Yeah, I agree on that. I think, I mean, if we think about this again, I mean, masculine and feminine for me aren't opposites in the way. No, they are polarities in one way, but I think there also are movements within us, like we talked about, right? Because they're existing in all of us. And I think if I'm just looking at the world today, if we learn to meet, not fix, not dominate, not retreat or hide, for me that's where the synthesis really comes up, right? That feels both grounded and alive in the same way.
Say something more about that. I like that.
That it's when you find the courage to meet your partner and be embracing both your masculine and feminine within yourself. I think this is really when the synthesis can come to life.
Yeah.
To life.
Yeah.
And that within you, when you do that, I think you can feel much more grounded within yourself. You will feel much more alive. You will enjoy life much more fully. You would actually be full as a person.
Yeah, and you can encounter so many more situations because you are much more flexible. But I think it's here like the first step is to really welcome all of that, but then being able to step into different qualities or different expressions, and that's when you can get the polarity again.
Yeah,
because I think you can lose polarity when you only welcome everything, and you welcome your masculine, your feminine, and that's beautiful. But it can become like a porridge where everything is equal.
No, I don't think that's where.
And to get the polarity again, you also have to sometimes step into, now I'm the holding, or now I'm surrendering, or now I'm letting go, or now I'm taking direction. And so you also need to, become the cayenne pepper.
I think in general in relationships, it is about staying curious as well, right? That you need to stay curious about your partner to embrace different sides, and that is where the polarity comes into play as well, right? But it's not just about staying in opposite sides and not seeing the other person in that sense, right? That's what I meant also when you meet the other person, not just trying to fix them or dominate them or control them, that you actually meet the person itself.
Yeah, and I think curiosity comes from when we actually feel safe, when we can be ourselves, and we can feel that when curiosity comes. So like when I talked about abusive men, and they are very stuck in a pole because they are so fearful. And if they can, feel safe and work with that wounded fear that they have, then they don't have to become so rigid in being dominant or powerful or structured. Then they will become curious, I think.
I agree on that.
And that's what I see like in conflicts as well between people. When someone feels seen and considered in their position, then they automatically move towards the other. Like with my friend, when he saw me in my disappointment and anger, then it was like, okay, so now I know that you value my position. Then I automatically moved towards him. So that's how I feel that I always come back to safety being the most important thing, and I think that's a ground for curiosity. And I know that to grow, you of course also need to challenge yourself. You can't just provide safety, but I think safety is just the most important foundation for everything else that we do within ourselves, or within the relationship, or in in the nation.
Yeah, I mean, you can take it on. It starts with yourself, and that then it spirals into everything else, right?
Yeah.
Jonas, thank you so much for joining. It was a pleasure having you here.
Thank you, Henrik.
Thank you for joining this 3-part journey with Jonas. This conversation has been about the courage to meet beyond roles and labels, and about understanding healing as something we do, not just talk about. If this episode resonated with you, please follow the podcast, share it with someone who might need it, and let the conversation continue. Because every time we meet with curiosity instead of defense, the distance between us gets smaller. Thank you for listening to 34O. Until next time, stay open, stay balanced, and stay human.